Turn it up, now we're back on air. Big games, big takes, yeah, we're going there. From the first hot mic to the final call. Nard Dawg Sports Show, talking ball. Headlines hitting, yeah, the day moves fast. We call the big shots, then we double back. From the fight nights, fairways, brackets too. Football Sundays, we're riding through. Win or lose, we still bring the heat. Talk it loud, keep it sharp, no retreat.
It's the Nard Dawg Sports Show, where the ball takes roll. Game time, prime time, let the whole thing go. Yeah, the Nard Dawg Sports Show, coming fast, talking goal. From the kickoff line to the final show.
All right, boys, it is college football preview season. We've gotten the Big 12 under our belts, and now it's time to move on to the ACC before we get to the real big boy conferences. Marsh, you know, we're still in the minors. We're going to go through the ACC today, but we'll get to the Big 10 and the SEC eventually. But look, I've been saying it in our group chat this week. I think the ACC is very interesting. I think there's a clear-cut favorite, and spoiler alert, there's a jersey on the screen of that team currently. At this point, I feel very confident saying I know who the best team is. I'm not confident in saying I know who's going to win the league, though, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Miami hasn't won the league under Mario Cristobal. Is that correct?
Miami hasn't won the ACC ever.
Yes. It's insane. I mean, last year, Duke and Virginia played in the ACC championship, and Miami played in the national championship. So it's a wild conference, kind of like the Big 12. But let's go ahead and dive into it, guys. Ryan, are you excited to talk ACC ball? And do you think it's going to be a little bit improved this year?
Excited. I would put my excitement level for the ACC above the Big 12. Definitely. I think they're the top tier of the ACC is more interesting to me. I think it's easier to follow. I'm very excited for what Miami can do in somewhat of a rebound year when you look at what they lost and the amount of NFL talent and high-end NFL talent they lost. Are they going to be one of the new big boys and just be able to reload every year and replace that high-end talent? Or are they going to struggle a little bit? And if they do struggle a little bit, I think the teams right now in that 2 to 6 range, any of them could really win it. So I think it's pretty wide open, and I'm excited for it.
Marsh, we're going to give you plenty of runway to talk Canes, but the conference as a whole, what excites you about this league this year?
Yeah, listen, Ryan alluded to it a little bit, the Big 12 kind of being, there's just weird teams in the mix all the time. The ACC is very much the same thing, right? There's, I think, probably 6 teams that are viable. I use contenders loosely because we'll get into the Miami Hurricanes here in a second. But like every year, last year it was Miami was a juggernaut, and then you blow a game against SMU and you lose against a Louisville team. There's always surprises. Virginia and Duke being in the ACC championship. Now, if we take a step back, I'd like to personally thank Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, for getting his head out his ass and changing the tiebreaker rules in the ACC, because Miami clearly should have won the ACC last year, been in that championship game. But the fact that the rules were specific to certain nuances that favored teams with 6 wins to go to the ACC championship, like just stupid shit like that needs to be eliminated. I mean, that should be an executive decision made right on the spot for how idiotic it is. But I digress. The ACC, I think, is a very exciting conference this year. Clemson has to rebound. They've had a down year, and it's kind of a prove it year for Dabo, believe it or not. SMU we can get into as well from a player perspective and coach perspective, but they bring a lot of excitement. And you look at the conference as a whole, there's a lot of this almost air raid or spread it out, score a lot of points. There's never been a whole lot of defense in the ACC outside of the Hurricanes mostly, but it's got a lot of intrigue this year, and we should see some fireworks.
For sure. And just one thing I wanted to point out before we get too deep into these teams and breaking down the rosters and whatnot, but The fact that the ACC has Cal and Stanford in it is just so fucking stupid. Why the ACC and the Big 12 don't trade? So the Big 12 could trade West Virginia, Cincinnati, and UCF, and the ACC could trade SMU, Cal, and Stanford, and then you'd have a much cleaner divide of like the East Coast and the West. It's just so fucking dumb. But it's just that's college football these days. Just accumulate, build 17, 18, 19 team leagues and just try to hoard as much of the TV money as you can, I guess. That's the name of the game.
I was just going to say, the fact that the Cal Bears have to travel 24,000 miles this year to play 10 games is the most moronic. I don't even know. It's dumbfounding. There's no clear answer as to why you think that is reasonable or to why you think like that makes sense from a conference standpoint. You have teams on opposite coasts, Miami, Florida, the very southeastern tip of our country, and Stanford and Cal, which are basically Northern California. Make it make sense.
It's so stupid.
I don't know why you'd want a conference where you'd get Pitt, West Virginia versus Virginia every year, where you can get Stanford versus Georgia Tech and Cal versus Duke.
Right. It's just so dumb. All right, Marsh, let's dive right in. We've got the Miami Hurricanes coming off a national championship appearance, a national runner-up. Hard-fought game against the Indiana Hoosiers, but didn't quite get over the hump. They bring a decent amount back, namely Malachi Toney, Mark Fletcher, two of the best skill position players in the country this year. But new quarterback, a lot of new faces on defense, a lot of new faces along the offensive line. I don't want to take away any of your thunder. You dive right in. Tell us everything you can about the Miami Hurricanes for 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Miami Hurricanes, first and foremost, are better this season. And let me tell you why. I think Darian Mensah, the $6 million man, highest paid NIL player in college football, we brought him over for a reason. We threw the bag at him. Now, granted, Miami took a few swings and misses, I think, in the portal and then said, okay, we got to just get aggressive. We're going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at Darian Mensah to come from Duke and just screw over our old friend Manny Diaz to bring him to the Miami Hurricanes. And listen, I think it is an absolute upgrade at quarterback. We'll start at the quarterback position with Darian, 4,000 yards, 34 touchdowns, 6 picks, for a dog shit Duke team in 2025 that really had a spotty offensive line at best. And now he brings over his top receiver from Duke and Cooper Barkate, over 1,000-yard receiver, and steps right into a situation with Malachi Toney and the deepest running back room in college football. Now, that doesn't even mention we took away South Carolina's second best receiver. We got West Virginia's top receiver from last season. We recruited well. We've got some 4-stars. We got another 5-star coming in at wide receiver as well. I mean, this team is absolutely loaded on the offensive side of the ball. Now, everyone's going to say you lost a lot of NFL talent. Yep, in the trenches especially. And we know that that's where Mario Cristobal wants to build his teams. The beauty of that, who better to take an inexperienced offensive line and do something with it than Mario Cristobal and Alex Norvell. Okay, they are the two brightest offensive line minds in the entire nation. They're going to form that thing into an absolute brick wall. And Jackson Cantwell is going to lead the front, the true freshman who is probably the biggest human being I've ever seen in my entire life. Number one offensive tackle recruit for this year coming in, and I think he's literally going to protect the blind side from day one, and he's going to be throwing people around like ragdolls. Okay. From an offensive standpoint, you look at what Shannon Dawson has done to this offense. You know, he comes in, they've got this high speed. It's kind of an air raid influence play calling system. Obviously, with the deep running back room, Mario wants to pound the rock too, so there's a heavy influence there. But I mean, we went from 5-7 in 2022 to 10 wins in 2024 to 13-3 national runner-up last year. And it's all because of what they're able to do developing this talent. and what they've got in the transfer portal. And this is arguably the best thing that they've done at Miami since their tenure there. So listen, when you go from 85th to 25th nationally in total offense in your first offensive coordinator season, and then go to a team that led both in scoring and total offense the entire nation last year, and you bring in a Darian Mensah and a Cooper Barcade on top of what you already had, the offense is clearly far and away, I think, the best offense of college football. And I know a lot of the analysts out there would probably agree with me. But then let's take a look at the defensive side. The defensive side of the ball is just dogs everywhere. Sure, you lose Ruben Bain. Sure, you lose Akeem Mesidor. You lose Keontae Scott. You lose Jacoby Thomas. All guys that are, Keontae was such a ball hawk. Jacoby Thomas was just decapitating people. There were some Sean Taylor-esque plays last year that had me hard as a rock. And then Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor were just wreaking havoc for every single team. How do you replace that? I totally understand where everyone's coming from. Well, you go get Damon Wilson in the portal from Missouri, and he had 9.5 sacks and 50 pressures in the SEC. Okay, let that sink in. We want to talk about the ACC as a shit conference, yada, yada, whatever, blow smoke. I don't give a shit. The fact that Damon Wilson has that kind of production in the SEC, comes over to the ACC, he's going to immediately take over for the Ruben Bain or the Akeem Mesidor position. Not to mention you have Marquise Lightfoot, who's more of a slender speed type rusher, but he's got all the moves. He's going to have some serious sack production. And then you look at the interior of that defensive line. Ahmad Moten could have been a day 2 pick in the NFL last year, decides to stay, probably one of the best D tackles in football. Justin Scott, 5-star recruit. He's coming on in the spring as a D tackle. This defensive line is going to pick up right where it left off. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Then you put in the 2 corners, Xavier Lucas. He's got the size. He's got the athleticism for Heatherman's defense. OJ, the juice man, Frederic. Okay. Freshman stud. Bryce Fitzgerald was a freshman stud last year as well. They bring back a ton of depth at the corner position. And then safeties, we just went to the transfer portal. Why not? Let's just go poach a few guys. Zachariah Poyser, he's going to be unbelievable on the back end. And then you look at Omar Thornton as well. And this guy at Boston College was just headhunting. I mean, I looked at a few highlights from him, and he was absolutely blasting any wide receiver that came across the middle, was just getting smoked by Omar Thornton. So we've got an identity at Miami. We have built the program to where Mario wants it. We are absolutely stellar in the transfer portal because we know South Beach has a ton of coin, and they are willing to throw it around down there in Coral Gables. And we're bringing in a guy like Darian Mensah on the offensive front too. I just think this team is upgraded in a lot of positions that people think there are holes. And I look at what Carson Beck did last year as a dink and dunk specialist. Now he's a smart quarterback, which is what helped out a lot. But that deep ball in the Indiana National Championship that he underthrew by 10 yards to pretty much end the game when we actually were driving to possibly win it, Darian Mensah's throwing a fucking seed there. Okay. So I am fired up about the Canes this year. I think they put up 40 points a game, and they will hang it on anybody. And when you look at Clemson in week 5, FSU's down, but that'll always be competitive just due to the rivalry. Yeah, we've got Bill Belichick, James Franklin on the schedule. I'm not super worried about that. I think they've got a lot of question marks. Louisville beat us last year. There's going to be a revenge element to that. We don't have SMU on the schedule this season. Probably see them in the ACC championship, and we'll get into that. Notre Dame, November 7th, okay? That's going to be huge. We know the Domers were real salty after we put an ass whooping on them in the beginning of the season last year. And I think everyone's talking about they're on a revenge tour and all this. Listen, you don't fucking play anybody, okay? You should be an ACC team. You're independent bullshit, whatever. Come play with the big dogs. Miami will stuff you in a locker again, and then we'll see you on the sidelines come CFP, okay? I think Miami's going to absolutely have a chance at undefeated football this year. I think they limit some of the mistakes and mishaps that I would blame on Carson Beck specifically last year, and we're going to make another run and win this whole thing.
I love the confidence, man. I think it's not unwarranted. I sat and watched the Miami Hurricanes rip my Ohio State Buckeyes apart on the line of scrimmage on New Year's Eve last year. Everyone kind of had Ohio State penciled in as the likely best team in the country, and then Indiana pushes us around in the Big Ten championship on the line of scrimmage, and then Miami does the same thing in Dallas in the Cotton Bowl. So I was very impressed. I think Mario Cristobal has done an incredible job building a physical, tough culture in Miami. Some of these guys are between Butch Davis and Larry Coker. You know, they emphasize skill position, speed, and Cristobal's come in and just implemented his style, which is get badasses on both lines of scrimmage and win in the trenches. And it's working. And that's why they are back to kind of elite status in the national scene, and probably really the only ACC team that I would say is definitely a contender for the national championship this year. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Miami as we see them come off their national championship appearance last year?
I'm going to take the other side on this one, guys. I am going to fade Miami a little bit this year. They lost 3 offensive linemen to the NFL, one being the 10th overall pick. That's only the second first-round draft pick on the O-line Cristobal has ever had, the other being Sewell from Oregon. So it's not like you can just replace those guys easily. And not only are they replacing him, the other tackle is a second-round draft pick. They had a guard go in the 6th round. So they are replacing 60% of their offensive line with a new quarterback, with a coach who still didn't know you should kneel the ball 2 years ago when you're up. Overall, I just don't buy Miami being the program that they think they are yet, where they just replace and come back and are just dominant on both sides of the line of scrimmage again. I mean, 2 edge rushers like Bain, that's not something you just easily replicate the next day, bringing in some transfer from Missouri. I'm sorry. It's just not. And I do think that they are going to compete for the ACC. I think they will have a good chance of making the playoff. I do not see them being serious contenders for the national championship at all this year. Sorry, Mark.
That's a buffoon take.
We'll see.
I actually, I love it. And I'm looking at their schedule. Their road games in conference are not necessarily like, I mean,
it's not a walk in the park.
September 18th at Wake Forest on a Friday night. Like, talk about a classic sleepy Miami not showing up, sleepwalking through the first half, given a team like Wake Forest, who is not a bad team at all. We'll get to them later in the show, but I mean, that's a game that's a classic Miami letdown spot.
So on that note, that is my birthday weekend, and Wake Forest is an hour and a half from here, and I plan on attending that game. But I also have thought to myself, this is classic me jinxing something, going to that, getting shit on, and just hating my life for the next couple weeks. So I am in a serious pretzel of whether I actually purchase a ticket and attend that game, because I can get seats on the 50-yard line about 12 rows up for very affordable cost. But I'm in a pretzel about it. I don't know. Like, I've seen too many disasters where I am directly inserted into the fold. And I almost want to not go just to make sure that things go okay.
And that's the reason right there I'm not taking them as a serious contender. If you're worried about a Wake Forest road game, I can't put you in the national contender or national championship contender category.
I'm not worried about a Wake Forest road game. I'm worried about the black cloud that follows me in these situations. Okay.
I will tell you what, the combination of Miami's history with your juju, if you attend that game, I may take a second mortgage out on my house to put on Wake Forest money line in that game.
Maybe it's an opportunity. Maybe we'll have to do a live stream for the listeners and see, there may be some beverages.
I may fly
involved,
up and do a Nard Dawg Sports live stream in the stands with you, just watching you get your heart ripped out on your birthday.
Yeah,
by the Demon Deacons.
It'd be good.
I mean, Wake Forest at Clemson. That's you got 2 games before October 3rd on the road up there in the Carolinas. Florida State shouldn't be too much of an issue. At North Carolina, Halloween, Bill Belichick, get spooky, get weird. And then at Notre Dame, we'll get to Notre Dame. Notre Dame's loaded. I think Notre Dame easily matches Miami talent for talent across the board. So on the road in November, those Miami boys going up to a cold weather outdoor stadium, could be cold, rainy, sleety. I mean, I think Miami's going to be very good, but yeah, Ryan, I'm kind of with you. I'm more with you than I am with Marsh in that they're a shoe-in national championship contender, will be 11-1 or 12-0, potentially a bye team in the 12-team playoff. Well, I think they've got some real landmines to navigate.
I would agree with you, but here's the thing, okay? I agree wholeheartedly. The Notre Dame game is going to be the toughest test of Mario Cristobal's career. Like you said, November, cold, they want revenge. Marcus Freeman is no slouch. He's going to come prepared. I look at the ACC portion of it, and Miami has to, they just have to get through the ACC without dropping 2 silly games. I mean, you could even lose 1 ACC game and lose to Notre Dame, and you're still more than likely going to make the playoff because you'll probably win the ACC championship. Like we're talking about Miami's talent level being elite versus some of these other contenders. Your SMUs, your Clemsons, your Louisvilles of the world. I think Miami understands the assignment this year. I think Mario is emphasizing we can't drop these stupid games anymore. Like that's going to be a huge emphasis this year, coming prepared every single week, showing up regardless who the opponent is. And then when you get to Notre Dame, the nice part about that is kind of a double-edged sword. Yeah, it's going to be cold. It's going to be a revenge game for Notre Dame. But at the same time, it is one of the last games of the season. So if you get through that with all your ACC wins, and then you got to come back, they have Duke, Virginia Tech, games. Virginia Tech, and Boston College to end the season. I feel pretty good about that. It's like, let's get to Notre Dame, college game day, 1 versus 2 in the country situation. And if we do drop it against Notre Dame, you still got a little bit of runway to kind of, make sure that you're in that playoff and in discussion for that first round.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
You get to that Notre Dame game undefeated. You've got some options at least that should free us up a little bit to go play hopefully our best football. And if we do drop that Notre Dame game, it's like, all right, now you got a 3-game stretch. It's like, you got to go 3-0. We can get ourselves back into this thing. We saw the run we made last year as a 10 seed, right? So I think from that perspective, just got to stay focused early in the season and not do the annual Miami meltdown on some stupid road game.
Pull up. All right, so let's take a look at Miami and their season-long futures from a betting perspective. And Marsh, Ryan, I'd love to hear what you guys think. Regular season wins over 10.5 is -115. Under 10.5 is -105. So basically even money. 10.5's the number. To win the conference, Miami is currently -135. -135 to win the ACC. To reach the playoff, Miami is currently, yes, -300, no, +220. And to win the national championship, Miami is +1100. So, futures, Ryan, Max, what piqued your interest there out of those numbers?
+220 to miss the playoffs, kind of juicy.
That is juicy
for a team like Miami, who historically has a game or two each year that they have a letdown. They have a tough road game with Notre Dame. That kind of sticks out to me. The 10.5. So wait, it's 10.5 regular season, or
10.5 regular season.
So if they lose,
they've got 12 games.
Okay.
Yep.
That's an under as well. Yeah, the 2 numbers to me that stick out are under 10.5 regular season and no to miss the playoffs at +220. Max, I'm sure you agree with me.
Well, listen, if I'm being realistic, the under 10.5, I mean, historically speaking, is batting 1,000, I think. if we're being honest, like, from an odds perspective. But you guys know this. I'll be a lame duck here. I am putting zero money on the Miami Hurricanes due to my emotional investment this season. I don't know that I could afford an emotional and a financial meltdown in the same season. So I think, from a financial standpoint, if I had to place a wager, it would certainly be the quote unquote juicy odds of 11 or 12 to 1 to win the Natty. I will be staying far away from putting any of my money on this because everything I touch turns to ash in the betting market. So I think I'll stay emotionally invested. We'll probably see some live streams on the Nard Dawg Sports podcast this season. Hopefully jovial and not psychopath meltdown, but we'll have to tune in and find out.
Look, Miami's going to be an incredibly fascinating team this year. Like I said at the top, probably the only clear-cut, true potential national championship contender in the ACC. There's some other teams that may get into that tier, but let's talk about them. Let's talk about SMU. Let's talk about Clemson. Let's talk about Louisville. We'll start down in Dallas with the SMU Mustangs, Rhett Lashley's Fighting Mustangs. Rhett Lashley has really kind of put a hard floor with SMU. They beat Miami at home last year, lost some tough games. They finished the season 9-4. They were 11-3 and in the playoff the year before that. But Ryan, I'm going to come to you. What do you like? What do you not like about the SMU Mustangs in the ACC race this year?
I mean, it really all goes through Kevin Jennings. When I think SMU, I think he gives them a very, very high ceiling. I think that they are right there with any team. I think the odds reflect this to win the ACC. I don't think their schedule is too unbearable this year. I think they can win a lot of games. I am a little concerned about their defense. I don't know. It's something about SMU just still doesn't feel like a big time ACC program. It seems like they still have a little bit of that underdog mentality, and the defense seems to struggle a little bit when it comes to big games. And I don't know if that will change as they continue to spend money and bring guys in the portal. But I do like SMU. I was looking at a lot of their win totals, and SMU seemed to be the one team where I kept on looking odds. I kept on coming back to them. I think that those are pretty good odds for what they are. And when I'm looking at a team like Miami and a team like SMU and comparing them, I come back to Kevin Jennings being the guy that separates those two teams. So I'm high on SMU overall. I don't want to give too much away, but SMU and Louisville are the two teams after doing this preview where I came out the highest on, honestly.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Marsh, I know it's going to be hard to pump the tires of some of these other ACC teams, but just looking at SMU objectively, there have to be some things that you kind of like, and they're not on Miami's schedule the regular season. Could see them in the ACC championship, but you obviously saw your Canes take an L over in Dallas last year, so got to have at least a certain baseline level of respect for what Rhett Lashley has done and what he's building at SMU.
Yeah, listen, Rhett Lashley comes from Miami, right? That's where he looked amazing. He turned a Tyler Van Dyke into a pretty damn good quarterback that season. They scored a lot of points. I look at his body of work and what he's done at SMU. Goes back to SMU where kind of his roots were, and signs a long-term deal. He's a hometown guy. Like they love him there, and he's done a great job. There's no way around it. Kevin Jennings is a good quarterback. I think you look at the history of Rhett Lashley and his offenses, and there's a lot of these kind of short, quick passes, slot passes, etc., and then boom, they hit you with the play action deep ball. I think he is a lot of the reason that Kevin Jennings is so good. Kevin Jennings, I think, a little dark horse for Heisman. I would dangle that carrot out there as far as juicy odds are concerned when we're looking at some long odds there. But it's very clear that Rhett Lashley is building an offense that makes it super easy for Kevin Jennings to have reads, right? There's not typically a third read that Kevin Jennings is getting to in a lot of instances. That's when he starts to use his legs and his mobility to escape the pocket and make something out of nothing. So it's a very clear-cut system that I think Kevin Jennings thrives in. And when you look at Miami versus SMU, offensive line is a problem for SMU too. They lost they returned 3 starters, but they lost 3 as well. They lost Chris Johnson Jr. He went over to Clemson. You look at kind of the receiver depth too. They lost a lot of talent. Ymir Knight is a name that stands out. Brett Lashley even said he should catch anywhere from 70 to 100 passes. So they're going to put a lot through kind of that quick route, almost Malachi Tony-esque. I hate to keep making Miami references. Listen, Brett Lashley kind of comes from that mold of what they're doing there, and they're going to get the ball in his hands and let him kind of create and then try to hit the deep ball once the safeties start cheating up. I like what Rhett Lashley's done there. I like SMU. They had a great red zone defense last year. I'd like to think that is solely contributed to Carson Beck, who I think had like 3 turnovers in the red zone in that loss last year. We should have easily won that game. I will pump their tires to an extent. The fact that you have the experience and the athleticism in Kevin Jennings and Rhett Lashley gets yet another year of him in that offense, they should take a little bit of a leap forward from that standpoint. But I just don't see them as giant slayers this year. I don't see them as somebody who's going to go in the playoff and make noise. We saw what happened when they won the ACC and they got, stomped out in the playoffs. We talked about the ACC and kind of the ambiguity of it. And I think you're going to see this team probably look really good for most of the season. Their schedule is very light. At Louisville, week 3 is really one that stands out. And then you get all the way to the end of the season where it's like at Notre Dame and at Stanford are your last 2 games. I think if Miami plays anybody in the ACC championship, it will probably be the Mustangs. I just don't see them as contenders necessarily when we start to get to playoff contention and conversation.
I'm kind of right there with you. I don't know that they're necessarily a team that I love as a playoff team. Looking at their odds over regular season, over under is 8.5. I'm looking at their schedule. I mean, they open the season at Florida State on Labor Day night. I think they win that game. That's a tough spot because that Florida State crowd, we saw it last year, opening week against Alabama. The crowd got behind the Noles and just kind of avalanched on Alabama there in Doak. And the same thing could happen on Labor Day night to SMU if the crowd's liking what they're seeing with the Ashton Daniels and the new Florida State roster. I think if SMU goes to Tallahassee, gets that win on Labor Day night, I think they're off to the races. And then it's really at Louisville, September 19th, like Marsh said. And then outside of that, I mean, you got to think that at Notre Dame, November 21st, the weekend before Thanksgiving, that's probably a loss. But that puts you at 11-1 if that's really the only loss that you can truly confidently pencil them in for. They get Virginia at home. They get Virginia Tech at home, at Louisville and at Notre Dame, at Florida State. So even if you lose those 3 games, I think, you're 9-3, you hit the over on the 8.5, right? So I like the over with this team, but it might be a 9-3, a pretty close call over that hits.
What was the over-under on SMU wins again?
8.5.
Yeah, and that's why I like
the shit out of that.
Because I looked at it and I even said, I'm going to give them Florida State, Louisville, Virginia, Notre Dame. I was like, 3 or 4 losses there. You just have to get 1 win there and you should hit that 9 number. So that's why
I agree.
I like that a lot more than I like the Hurricanes at 10.5.
Yeah, Miami's obviously inflated due to the national championship appearance and the run they went on last year. But as an ACC person, knowing what SMU's capable of and the fact that schedule is a little suspect, we'll call it, outside of Louisville and Notre Dame, to Ryan's point, there's no doubt in my mind that they win 9 or more games. I don't see a glaring loss on there outside of one of those 2 teams in Louisville and Notre Dame. Over 8.5 seems like a mortal lock.
Agreed. I think we're all in unison there. To win the ACC is plus 750. Not terrible.
That's
they're plus 750 and Louisville's next at plus 800. It seems like whoever wins that game in September is likely the team that you would kind of pencil in to play Miami in the ACC championships at plus 750 and plus 800. And you're probably not looking at a money line that high against Miami on a neutral field if one of them gets to that point.
Yeah, I look at plus 750 to win the ACC. That's definitely juicy. I think the only reason it's maybe that high is obviously you think about they got to get through Miami, but another team that we're not really talking about, and we can go ahead and jump right in here, is the Clemson Tigers. And what Dabo's got in front of him to bounce back, because there were a lot of pissed off people in Death Valley last year. That program is going to have to really show some things this year. But Nard, let's hear your take on the Clemson Tigers and what you think Dabo is able to accomplish this season.
Yeah, I think that there's some encouraging signs out of Clemson. They finally started using the portal a little bit. I love what they have at receiver with TJ Moore and Brian Wesco coming back. Gideon Davidson, running back, who, I don't think he's special. He's not like a CJ Spiller or a Travis Etienne, but he's solid. He's a solid hard runner. Clemson always has good, strong defensive talent. I think, this year they've got a couple probably day 1, day 2 NFL draft picks with Sammy Brown and Will Helt. Clemson needs to bounce back in the worst way. Last season, to have those expectations to start the season in a top 10 matchup with LSU at home, you blow that one. It's so funny. The conversation coming out of that game was, that's probably 2 playoff teams that we just saw go head to head. And then, LSU got the win, and then both their seasons kind of fell apart. And then Brian Kelly got fired, and, Dabo under fire. Clemson was 3-3 after starting the season as a top 10 team, but their schedule this year, they open the season down in Baton Rouge. It'll be Lane Kiffin's first game in Death Valley. That'll be very interesting. They got to go out to Cal on a Friday night with that stud quarterback that Cal has. Then they host Miami. They get Virginia Tech at home. They play at Florida State. They get Georgia Tech at home, and then they host South Carolina in their rivalry game at the end of the year. So I don't think it's a very easy schedule, but I think Clemson, there's so much track record of Dabo. He's got his offensive coordinator back now. Chad Morris is back. Chad Morris was the OC from 2011 to 14, with Taj Boyd and DeAndre Hopkins and Sammy Watkins. The offensive identity should be back to Clemson football. You know what you're going to get on defense with Clemson's. I think they're going to have a rebound year. I think they're going to be in the mix in the ACC into late October, mid-November. But to me, I think there's too many landmines on the schedule, and I think they're probably, more like a 8-4, 9-3 type team. Ryan, what do you make of the Tigers this year?
See, it's funny. I was looking at their schedule, and obviously they start the year with LSU week 1, and then week 5 they have Miami. But outside of that, and maybe it's just me thinking more the Clemson of old, I was looking at their schedule and thinking it's very doable, and a lot of games on there where I expect them to win. So I guess I am high on Clemson overall. I think Dabo will get back to more of the winning ways. I think this might be the first year where they're actually bringing in anyone in the portal. They have just been recruiting high school players up to this point, which when you're losing guys every year and then you're just trying to bring in high school kids to replace them, that's tough. And we've seen the last 3 national champions in IU, Ohio State, and Michigan. Those have been like 3 of the oldest rosters in the country each of the last 3 years. You want experienced old men, not 19-year-old kids who still need multiple years with the strength and conditioning coach to really make the impact that they're eventually going to make. I like that he's at least adapting a little bit. I like Clemson. As crazy as it is, I was actually looking at Clemson to go undefeated at 50-1. I didn't end up placing it. I'm not going to, but I was just thinking about it like 2 years ago. If you told me you can get Clemson to go undefeated at 50-1, I'm hammering that. And then I look at the schedule and I go, could they beat LSU? Could they beat Miami? I was kind of looking at it as like, that's kind of like a 50-1 parlay. Because if they beat those 2 teams, I do expect them to go undefeated, especially regular season. I didn't pull the trigger because I don't think they will actually beat both those teams, but they're plus 350 against LSU. And if they're about that same odds against Miami, that parlay is really about 18-1, not 50-1. But I think Clemson gets back to being Clemson and is right in the conversation with making the playoffs.
I mean, they won the ACC 2 years ago, and they were in the playoffs, and then they still had to go to Texas. In that round one game. So they're only 1 year removed from winning the ACC and being in the playoff. Last year did not go anywhere close to according to plan, but it's so weird. I'm looking at the national championship odds, and I'm so used to seeing Clemson up there with the Notre Dames, the Ohio States, the Alabamas of the world. Right now, they're sandwiched at 100-1 to win the national championship. They're same odds as BYU and Iowa. Kind of crazy to think that that's where Clemson is at right now in the national championship landscape, but it's hard to get excited about this quarterback. It sounds like he could be a fine game manager, but from what I'm reading, from what I'm seeing, I know he played a little bit last year. He only attempted 71 passes, though. Doesn't seem like he's the most mobile guy. He's not like a Taj Boyd or Deshaun Watson, where he can hurt you with his legs too. I think the quarterback spot's the big question mark. The rest of the roster looks to be okay, but offensive line, quarterback, that's not really the most ideal place to have your major concerns. So Clemson is a toss-up for me. I could see their season go either way. Marsh, you have anything more on Clemson and kind of what you're predicting for them this year?
Yeah, I agree in a lot of ways with you, Casey. I think the quarterback being inexperienced. Listen, the kid played in like 5 games last year. Most of it garbage time. I mean, the RPO that is Chad Morris's offense is going to get a little interesting because this kid's not the most mobile, friendly quarterback out there. And they're going to rely heavily on getting the ball in the receiver's hands quick. They brought a lot of speed over. We talked about Chris Johnson from SMU and then Gideon Davidson as well. They've got a lot of explosiveness in the backfield. But I don't like that they're weak in the trenches. I don't like that they're weak at quarterback. And frankly, I think for Clemson, they luck out a little bit because they get Miami at home. They get Virginia Tech at home. Those are really the ACC game, even North Carolina at home. Like any ACC team of real meaning is in Death Valley, which will help the quarterback. At LSU week 1 will be interesting, but even if they lose that game, it doesn't hurt their ACC hopes. They've got some very favorable schedule working in their favor here, like Ryan said. But to me, I think there's a kind of a bigger storyline, even some correlations here. With 18 years of Dabo at the helm and all the success that he's had, the noise that we heard last year when they were struggling was loud. And it was surprising and shocked me a little bit. And I think the NIL has a lot to do with this. We talked about their lack of going out in the portal. I think Dabo's got some real character aspect to him where like he doesn't agree with some of the NIL stuff, and that has shown through on the roster a little bit. But I look at what happened to John Harbaugh in the NFL and how many years he was at the Ravens and won a Super Bowl and was perennial playoff contender. And I draw some parallels to where Dabo's at right now. And I think if Clemson has another down year where they lose 3 games, maybe don't make the playoff again, the fact that noise was loud after last year, I think it'll be really interesting to see. I don't know that they'll fire him, but I think all of a sudden you're looking at Clemson Tigers with one of the biggest hot seats at head coach if they don't perform.
I understand that the noise was there, but that's one of those situations where it's like, be careful what you wish for. I don't know where 100%. Clemson is going to go to replace Dabo, a guy who's won multiple national championships.
Yeah, I agree. I think you look at the Miamis and the SMUs of the world, though, and what they're doing in the portal and what they're spending in NIL and the talent that they're bringing in. And all of a sudden we've flipped this script overnight of who's really competitive in the ACC. Dabo kind of sticking to his guns of homegrown talent, recruiting, developing. Like, I think that noise in that particular fashion is going to continue to pick up, and you're going to have boosters that are like, hey, we're giving you some of this NIL money. You're trying to give it to recruits versus getting the portal, or we're not seeing the overnight results that some of these other teams are. I feel like there's a stubbornness to Dabo, and it may cause some friction. I don't know that it's fireable offense. I think going into next season in 2027, there's going to be a lot more of that. and expectations, like winner or you're out kind of thing. I feel some tension there, and maybe it's just me, but it could be interesting.
All right, let's look at Clemson's futures real quick. So over under for Clemson in the regular season is 7.5. Over 7.5 is -135. Under 7.5 would pay plus 115. To win the ACC, they are plus 1,500 on Hard Rock, which may be a little inflated because Miami's odds are a little bit deflated being here in Florida. To reach the playoff, Clemson is plus 700 to reach the playoff as a yes. No is minus 1,400. Crazy for Clemson to be no playoffs minus 1,400. And like I said earlier, national championship odds for Clemson, 100-1, right there with Iowa and BYU. Ryan, Max, anything jump out in terms of Clemson season-long futures?
My take's pretty boring on this, honestly. I don't see value in either one of those. I don't think plus 700 is enough for me to take Clemson, and minus 1,400 is too much. Like, this is one of those that I'm probably keeping at arm's length, giving the Clemson Tigers another year to figure out what the hell is going on, and if they're going to get back to what they were, or if this is just going to be the new norm. I like the win total a little bit better. You look at Georgia Southern, Charleston Southern, Florida State, like that's 3 easy wins. And then, you've got to beat 3 of North Carolina, Cal, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, Duke, and that's counting losses against South Carolina and LSU. So it's interesting to see where they're at in this. I think there's too much unknown with this Clemson Tiger football team for me to try and sway one way or another. I think I'm looking for better odds and more comfortable picks elsewhere.
The only thing that really sticks out to me is the over 7.5. I like. I don't love it at minus 135, but I do like it. And at plus 1,500 to win the ACC, I think it might be worth like a very small sprinkle, a quarter unit or something. Too. I do like them to win the ACC more than I like them to make the playoff at plus 700. I don't know why. I don't know if that actually makes sense, but that's all that really sticks out to me.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I agree because Mark just talked about the new tiebreaker rules. Like, they're not going to get in the ACC championship with a 5-3 ACC record and be 7-5 ACC or 8-5 ACC champion. Like, if they get to the ACC championship and they win, it probably means they probably lost to Miami 7-1 in the ACC, maybe lost to LSU and South Carolina. But that would put them at 10-3 ACC champion. They're going to get in the playoff, I would imagine. If you think that's their path to get into the playoff, well, let's take them at plus 1,500 to win the ACC versus plus 700. I guess you get them as an ACC championship game loser, but I don't see that path as clearly as being 7-1 with only 1 loss in conference to Miami and then getting to the ACC championship, maybe a rematch with Miami, and they win. Miami's already in, and they get in that way, and you cash your 15-1 ticket on them being ACC champion. I don't hate that at all as a sprinkle either, Ryan. All right, so Louisville Cardinals, they are currently kind of right there in the same tier, same bracket as SMU, right in front of Clemson for the ACC championship. But Louisville, an interesting team, another team like SMU that went into Miami and took down the Hurricanes last year. Marsh, I'll come to you first for that reason. What do you make of the Louisville Cardinal this year?
Yeah, Jeff Brom's done a good job with this team. I knew this Louisville loss was going to happen to Miami last year. Chris Bell was an absolute stud. Isaac Brown, who's still there, he is one of the best running backs in the ACC, arguably one of the top backs in the country just based on his explosive demeanor. So I think this team looks good. For me, the biggest question mark is Lincoln Kienholz, the QB coming in from Ohio State. When you look at his lack of experience and, he's got all the traits and whatnot, but how long will that development take for Jeff Brom? No better person to do it than him. Louisville is always that team that's lurking. They're like a shark with a blood mile away in the water. They're circling, they're coming. I think they'll be in contention. It all comes down to some of those top games on their schedule. Ole Miss week 1, You get in the ACC slate, SMU, NC State, and then really Pitt at the end of the season. If they get through this early stretch of the season with Ole Miss and SMU, they've got a real opportunity to be in the ACC championship. Kentucky at the end of the season is not as much of luster as it once was. Louisville's got a really good shot. Another year under Brom. Isaac Brown is really peaking and one of the most explosive players in the league. So I'll be interested to see kind of how they do in that front part of the season, whereas most of these ACC teams we've talked about, we're looking at the back part of their schedule as kind of the beef. So we may see kind of some interesting rankings that fluctuate, obviously, between the start and the finish of the season.
Ryan, what do you got on the Cardinals?
Yeah, being up in Columbus, word on the street is the Buckeyes might have let the better quarterback get out of the room in Kienholz. In all seriousness, I'm not super sold on him. I do love Jeff Brom. If anyone can bring it out of him, I do think it's him. I do think it's the style of offense. He took Purdue to a Big Ten championship. He can do a lot with less talent. So that might be what he has to do with Kienholz this year. But besides that Ole Miss game, there is a lot of winnable games on their schedule. I think they will start the season with a loss. That's always a tough way to start the season. But overall, I put them right there in that same category with Clemson and SMU. I think those are going to be the three teams that are right there behind Miami that are really fighting for the right to play in the championship game. I'm much higher on Louisville than I am Virginia Tech, the Florida State, the other kind of second tier of teams there. So I like them, and I'll move on and see what Casey thinks on this.
I think I'm not ready to write off that Ole Miss game to open the season in the Titans Stadium in Nashville. I'm not ready to write that off as a loss for them. Let's see what Kienholz can do. Brom at the helm calling the offense. You got Brown in the backfield pounding the rock. Isaac Brown, the Lightning, and Keyshawn Brown, the Thunder to his Lightning. And then if Kienholz can exceed expectations, distributing the ball and getting the ball out to the wide receivers, and he's a good runner. Ohio State kind of used him a lot that year that we had Kyle McCord kind of take over and be the primary quarterback at Ohio State. Kienholz would come in as kind of the change of pace running quarterback. I liked what I saw out of him using his legs. He started that Cotton Bowl a couple years ago against Missouri. Offense really kind of sputtered. I think we scored 3 points the entire game against Missouri. That was the year that we had essentially a quarterfinal playoff game against Michigan. Didn't get the job done, and Michigan went on to win the national championship. We got 3 points against Missouri in the Cotton Bowl as kind of consolation prize that year. But Kienholz, it's been 2 years since that game. And hopefully, he's matured physically and intellectually. I think the Brom boys at calling the offense and the ability to kind of lean on the running game with the Brown boys. I think Louisville could be a threat in the ACC. Brand-wise, I just trust Clemson and SMU a little bit more, given recent track record. Louisville could be in the mix, but they're probably a clear, fourth for me on in this year's race. Let's do the Virginia Tech Hokies. New leadership. James Franklin, the disgraced Penn State coach who was dismissed after a 3-3 start in Happy Valley last year. He now takes the Virginia Tech job. One of the most interesting things about Virginia Tech to me is that James Franklin brings back his former defensive coordinator at Penn State, who left Penn State to take the Virginia Tech head coaching job. Brent Pry is now back as James Franklin's defensive coordinator. Brent Pry, swallows his pride. He got fired by Virginia Tech mid-season last year. He says, fuck it, I'll go back. I like Blacksburg. I like working with James Franklin. I'll be the defensive coordinator. So he's got his defensive coordinator that he had the most success with back. And I think James Franklin's a really good coach. I think Penn State kind of screwed up getting rid of him. I like Matt Campbell too. We'll talk about Penn State more in the Big Ten preview, but Virginia Tech is instantly more credible, instantly more talented, instantly has a stronger identity under James Franklin. I would love to see Virginia Tech get back to being one of those top 15, 20 programs, be up in the top of the ACC mix with Miami and Clemson and SMU on a routine basis. And I think James Franklin can put them there. Will Virginia Tech ever win a national championship with James Franklin? Probably not. Can they win the ACC a couple times? Can they get to the playoff? I think they can. Ryan, I'll come to you first. What do you make of Virginia Tech?
I think it's going to be a very fun first year with Franklin there. I hope they get back to being what Virginia Tech was when we were growing up. They obviously brought in a lot of guys followed Franklin from Penn State. So it's going to be a lot of new faces in Blacksburg, but feel like this season will be somewhat just a muted, okay season where they win 6 or 7 games. I don't love them at all. I don't hate them. I think they will get better. I think Franklin is a good coach. I don't think he's a great coach. This year for Virginia Tech is just going to be about setting the building blocks for the future and getting a foundation set to where they can become a team that competes for their ACC every year, which I do expect them to get back to that.
Marsh?
Yeah, it's all about James Franklin. Listen, I'm not high on him this year. He brought over a lot of the Penn State backups, essentially. Players that were kind of on the cusp of getting more playing time and being next wave at Penn State, which is a great foundation. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think this season's going to be it for him. I think they're going to take some time to develop. I do think they got pretty lucky in the fact that they don't get Miami until second to last game of the season. So they got plenty of time to prepare and get that culture built and get the team playing the way that he wants to an extent. But this is probably a multi-year thing. Next season, we're going to be looking at Virginia Tech a little bit different. Enter the Sandman's probably going to hit a little bit harder next season. You know, Blacksburg is probably going to be rocking a little bit more next season. James Franklin's going to build something special there. We talk about the ACC being kind of wishy-washy, and there's new teams, it feels like, that are the contenders each season outside of Miami being fully back and probably a perennial powerhouse. But I think Virginia Tech is certainly one of those teams that will come in next season and really even the year after and be talked about as one of the top 3 favorites to win the conference. It's just going to take a little bit more time to get those Penn State transfers up to speed, and obviously the portal and recruiting and all of that. I think year 3 is a big one.
Look, I have a future that I want to give out here, and it's on Virginia Tech. It's on the over 6.5. It's minus 155. But you look at their schedule. They open the season with these 7 games. Virginia Military Institute at home, Old Dominion at home, at Maryland, at Boston College, Pittsburgh, at Cal, Georgia Tech. So that's 7 games right there that I don't think any of them are necessarily losses. They could lose at Cal. They could lose to Pitt. They could lose to Georgia Tech. Those are toss-up games. But I don't think you can write in a loss. So that's the first 7 games. They go at Clemson, at SMU, probably both losses. But then Stanford at home, which is should be another win, at Miami, and Virginia at home. A rivalry game with a team that's kind of in their same tier here in the ACC race, right? Kind of a second-tier team, a lot of new pieces, a lot of new parts, a little bit more coaching continuity. You'd probably pencil in 3 losses at Clemson, at SMU, at Miami, but then you got 9 other games to get 7 wins with the stability and the excitement and the momentum that I think James Franklin will bring to this team this year and this program. I like that. I think they can go 7-2 in those games outside of those 3 tough ACC games. Let's do Virginia. I will go to Marsh first on this one. Kind of a surprise team last year, right? Tony Elliott was kind of on the hot seat. And then all of a sudden, Virginia really pops. They have that huge Friday night win early in the season last year against Florida State. And that propels them to an 11-win season. They were in the ACC championship game. They would have been in the playoff had they gotten the job done in Charlotte against Duke. They didn't, so they ended up going to the Gator Bowl. They beat Missouri in the Gator Bowl to finish the year at 11-3. Tony Elliott firmly off the hot seat now, and they bring in Bo Pribula from Missouri, so another transfer quarterback like Chandler Morris. They have a lot back on defense. I think Virginia's a fun team to kind of keep an eye on this year. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think last year was a little bit fluky. Like you said, Tony Elliott was on the hot seat. Chandler Morris came in and was a bit of a savior in that instance. Now, they've got a deep experienced room at quarterback with Pribula coming over and then Eli Holstein from Pitt. Pribula's background is in that RPO pistol offense, and that's exactly what what Des Kitchings wants to do here at Virginia. So I think it's a good fit schematically. That'll probably help some of the transition to a new team. The skill positions there are obviously a big downgrade. They lost Jamari Taylor, lead running back, and a couple guys as well in the wide receiver rooms. I look at them as one of those teams. Again, it's the ACC. It's kind of the anything can happen conference, but I just don't see the same magic that we saw last year. When you look at what their body of work is versus what they've brought in, nothing jumps off the page to me. And I think Virginia is probably another, 6, maybe 7 win team if they have a decent season.
I don't have a whole lot to add on Virginia. I'm not super high on them. I was looking at the unders on their win totals, but then looking at their schedule, they don't play Notre Dame. They don't play Miami. They don't play Louisville. So they do play SMU. Yeah, they don't play Clemson either. So it's like you get these unbalanced schedules in these leagues. Even if I'm not high on them, there's a lot of wins on their schedule. They play Norfolk State and Delaware, 2 of their out-of-conference schedules. So 2 pretty easy wins, and then a favorable ACC schedule. As much as I am not high on them, I don't think I found any unders that I actually like. And I almost might even talk myself into an over, which is, I don't know. You go into something thinking you're going to bet one way, and then you're just on the opposite side after looking at the odds and the schedule. I don't know if that makes sense, but it might.
Yeah, the under 7.5 would pay plus 125 on Hard Rock, Florida, but it's hard to find 5 losses I feel confident in, with Bo Perbula and they've got good defense back. They're pretty steady on the offensive line. They brought in a running back from Tennessee, another one from Middle Tennessee. They've got a good tight end in Dakota Twitty. Keep all their coaches intact. Outside of at SMU, where's the other auto losses? Nowhere. I mean, they can beat every other team on their schedule. 11-1 is on the table as much as 6-6 is to me, or 7-5. I don't like the under on that. I kind of like the over, but can you win? There's probably 7 toss-up games, and then 3 to 4 easy ones. Norfolk State, Delaware, Duke at home, Syracuse at home. Like, it's a fairly easy path to 8 wins, in my opinion. Florida State Seminoles, Mike Norvell on the hottest of hot seats. I mean, his buns are burning, boys. They went 5-7 after starting the year off with a huge win over the Alabama Crimson Tide. They start off 3-0, then they lose 4 in a row, get a win over Wake Forest and Virginia Tech, but lose 3 out of their last 5. Just an incredibly disappointing way to end the season, going 2-7 down the stretch after starting off 3-0 with a win over Alabama. That's coming off a 2-10 season the year before, which directly followed a 13-0 regular season where they got left out of the 14 playoff. But they bring in some new pieces. They've been very transfer portal reliant since Mike Norvell came. But Marsh, what do you see with your team's biggest rival historically, the Florida State Seminoles?
Yeah, little brother and Mike Norvell, like you said, his ass is burning. He's going to have gauze all over that thing by the end of the season, and I'm not sure it's because of the hotness under his seat or the fucking ass whooping that Miami's going to give them this year. Let me tell you, the Seminoles are unbelievably embarrassing to this point. Mark Norvell, you better get very, very, very comfortable with selling insurance after this season, because that's exactly where you're going to be, is behind a desk in corporate America, my friend. I think the Seminoles, sure, you got Trey Wisner from Texas. You got Deuce Robinson, who's definitely a stud receiver. A guy's got some serious Mike Evans vibes to him. But you got to have a quarterback throwing the ball. And Ashton Daniels, he's been passed around more than a $2 hooker. I don't understand where any confidence from this team comes from. They've gotten better at skill positions. But I think overall, Mike Norvell is gone after the season. Florida State's back to building from nothing. And I would be shocked if they win more than 5 games this season.
It's a brutal schedule.
Yeah, the thing that sticks out most to me on Florida State is you look at their schedule. 6 of their first 8 weeks could be losses. They open up New Mexico State, week 0, which you'd hope that's a win. If that's not a win, they're in for a long season because the next 2 games are SMU and at Alabama, 2 brutal games. Arkansas State, which is a very winnable game, you'd hope. And then Virginia, Louisville, Miami, Clemson to open up the ACC schedule. Those are the 4 teams that we've been talking about as the 4 teams you don't really want to see. You have teams like Virginia, who only has to see one of them. Florida State does not see Notre Dame. If they did see Notre Dame, that would just be brutal. I look at that schedule. You end the season with Pitt, NC State, and Florida, too. Those aren't easy win games for Florida State either. I love the under on them. I don't see Norvell surviving this season. I don't really know where Florida State goes from here, but they got to go up.
Yeah, I said 5 or 6 wins. That's best case scenario for this team. I literally think they could win 3 ball games this season and ultimately have the most historically awful Florida State season of all time. Bobby Bowden is going to just be rolling over seeing what has happened to this program because Mike Norvell is trash. That guy has single-handedly taken a great program and just threw it on the ground, spit on it, and stomped on it.
Yep. I love the under. I love the under 6.5. It's minus 165. It could be minus 265. I count 3 wins maybe that I'm confident in New Mexico State, Central Arkansas. I mean, even at like the last time they went to Boston College 2 years ago, they were 16-point favorites in week 2. They got beat 28-13. So, like, even at Boston College is not a gimme. SMU should be a loss. At Alabama should be a loss. I think Virginia's better. At Louisville should be a loss. At Miami, a loss. Clemson at home is probably a loss. At Pitt, NC State, Florida, yikes. That is not, I mean, when does Norvell get fired is probably the better bet. Probably after a 40-point beatdown in Tuscaloosa. That's September 19th.
I would put the over-under at week 5.5 because I think he's opening with 3 of 5 losses.
Yeah.
And I think if they lose 3 of the first 5, he's gone.
Yeah, you've seen the Tallahassee faithful, Nard. They're all over in Tampa, and those people are going to be up in arms if they lose 3 out of 4.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think they'll have a good running game. I think Ashton Daniels can use his legs. I like their running backs with Trey Wisner and that former 5-star. His name's like Osmane Chroma. Deuce Robinson's a stud 6'6" receiver that you can just launch the ball up to and try to get some plays downfield. This is not a prototypical Florida State defense where they have any studs that you can really point to. There is no Jared Verse on this defense. There is no Derwin James. There is no Jalen Ramsey. This is a pretty mediocre talent defense and an offense that is probably their best execution is going to be trying to pound the rock, and they've got offensive line questions. So very hard to see a path to even a winning season, let alone any type of like playoff or ACC contention. I think Florida State's in big trouble. When we do this preview show next year on the ACC, I think we're talking about a whole new program, a whole new infusion of energy into the Florida State Seminole program, like Virginia Tech this year with James Franklin. Franklin would insert a floor. Like, James Franklin would never go 2-10 in the ACC. I'll tell you that. Like, James Franklin was winning 8, 9, 10 games in the SEC at Vanderbilt, right? It's a shit show. And like I said, living here in Tampa, there is a lot of indifference and fatigue with this Norvell regime. So,
I'm going to make my call right now with an even decent first year as a head coach. I think next year's 2027 head coach at Florida State is Brian Hartline.
Oh, I could see that. It probably wouldn't be like a super expensive buyout.
No, and it's juicy because he's local in USF. Local being a couple hours from Tallahassee. They'll see and hear about success from him if he does well.
Played for the Dolphins for a lot of his career, has some like South Florida potential recruiting ties, and good young guy.
Tax benefits, big payday.
And if you're Florida State, like he comes from Ohio State, who believes very strongly in primary roster building coming from high school recruiting. Norvell has been a terrible high school recruiter ever since he came to Florida State. Very kind of indifferent towards high school recruiting, tries to build through the portal. It worked that one year. They caught lightning in a bottle when they went 13-0 and just barely missed out on the playoff, but it's been a disaster since then.
All right, getting towards the bottom tier of the ACC. Casey, what do you got for us on the Pittsburgh Panthers this year?
Yeah, Pitt, they share a stadium with my favorite NFL team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I've always paid a little bit closer attention to them for some reason. We drafted Kenny Pickett a few years ago. That didn't work out well for us. Pat Narduzzi, it kind of stuck up on me, but he's been there. Will be his 12th season. He's been solid, not spectacular. One of those guys that inserts a floor into a program. They haven't really bottomed out ever that I can recall. I think this entire season comes down to their offensive line and how well their transfer portal additions in the offensive line room translate to the field. They've got a pretty good young quarterback in Mason Heinschel, I think is how you pronounce it. They've always got some good pieces in the defensive front sevens. I think we're talking about 8-4 on the high side for them, the best case scenario. And I think worst case scenario, probably like a 5-7, but competitive, maybe in some games that you wouldn't think they would be in. They've got a fairly tough schedule, but they're just going to be a good, hard-nosed, tough football team. Hopefully a little bit better on the offensive line and a young quarterback that can sling it a little bit, but nothing really in the offensive skill positions that really terrifies you. So, I think they're a mediocre squad.
Okay, let's move to another mid-tier team right down by Max in Carolina. What do you think of the Duke Blue Devils this year?
Yeah, Duke is in trouble. Darian Mensah obviously being the big piece of that, and Cooper Barkate both come to Miami in the portal, get the bag. Manny Diaz obviously is scrambling a little bit. I think they got San Jose State's quarterback in the transfer portal who threw for all of 17 touchdowns last season. So it's looking a little bleak. Duke football is probably back to where it should be, and that is lackluster compared to the basketball program and lacrosse program there. So I think Duke's right where they should be, and Manny Diaz has got some serious work to do this season.
Okay, yeah, and it'll be a weird look this year without Haynes King down in Atlanta. But Casey, what do you have of the Georgia Tech this year?
Yeah, Haynes King, funny you bring him up. You have some of those guys that just kind of stick out to you as just like kind of college football legends, and like their team never really did too much that was that impressive. But Haynes King is just kind of a redneck, tough nose, ran the shit out of the ball. Just someone that when I think of Georgia Tech football for the next 20 years, Haynes King will come to mind, and he's gone. So they bring in Alberto Mendoza, Fernando Mendoza's little brother, Alberto Mendoza, coming in. He was Fernando's backup last year at Indiana. I think he got a little bit of time when Indiana would be blowing teams out. I don't expect him to be as dangerous with his legs and as much of a just tough nose kind of hustler gamer like Haynes King was. But I love Brent Key. He's got 2 new coordinators this year. They're rebuilding the offensive line. Quarterback, probably some learning curves. We're going to find out about them right away. They opened the season with Colorado and Tennessee. So 2 Power 4 out-of-conference games right away. They bring in Justice Haynes, who spent time at Alabama, who spent time at Michigan. I think he's a really good running back. Georgia Tech loves running the football. Probably good front seven on defense. Probably a tough defensive team, a team that wants to run the ball, and maybe a little bit of upside potential with Alberto if he pops. Mediocre again, kind of in that same tier as Pitt. Season could go anywhere from a 4-8 to an 8-4 type of season. Colorado, Tennessee, and then at Georgia to end the season. So 2 SEC teams and a Big 12 team on their out-of-conference schedule and a decent ACC slate. So 6-6 would be kind of my target range.
Okay, and they are right outside the triangle, but still down in Carolina. Max, what do you think Wake Forest will do this year?
Yeah, Wake is they're a little frisky. They're a little frisky. It's Dickert's first season there. He got his staff. They brought over Gio Lopez, that quarterback that was at UNC, was pretty lackluster, but they're really
got better down the stretch.
Yeah, he did get better down the stretch, but really where their strengths are is on the defensive side of the ball. Their defensive front is mostly back. They created a lot of negative plays last year. Langston Hardy led the ACC, ranked 5th nationally with 17 tackles for a loss and 7 sacks. So their front seven is looking pretty good. Deeper running back room. Obviously, they lose Damon Claiborne, who was a stud, can't really be replaced, but they did bring some size and receiving ability. I think overall, Wake could really surprise some people this year. They've got Miami early in the season. It is at home. We talked about how I probably should stay away from that game to not jinx it and give Dickert a massive win there. They're one of those intriguing ACC teams that we talk about, and they could play really good defense, kind of control the game, control the clock aspect. If they can pull off that big upset, whether it's Miami or somebody else, I think they're going to be one of those middle of the road teams. I don't necessarily think they'll contend, but they're definitely not going to be one of those bottom of the barrel teams like we would typically see at Wake Forest.
Tough out, but yeah, probably not getting a ton of huge wins when all is said and done, right?
Exactly.
All right, and then on to everyone's favorite ACC program, the Cal Bears. Casey, you think Cal can make any noise this year in the ACC?
I do. I actually like what Cal is doing out there. I like that they brought in Tosh Lupoy, head coach, former Cal defensive lineman. He's been Oregon's defensive coordinator. He was part of 2 national championship teams as, I think, a positional coach or assistant positional coach under Saban at Alabama. He's coaching the NFL. And there seems to be a lot of excitement and buzz about him coming back to be the head coach of the Cal Golden Bears. They've got an assistant GM working underneath Ron Rivera, Marshall Charrington, who I keep seeing his name and hearing good things about him. They are bringing in good talent, probably the best talent that the Golden Bears have ever brought in. They've got excitement in their new head coach, but everything starts and ends with their quarterback. I'm going to call him JKS because I have his name, the pronunciation of his name literally pulled up on Google right now. It is 18 different syllables. I'll try it. Jaron Keave Songa Po Lu Telly.
Nailed
JKS. He's a stud. Came in as a true freshman last year, was slinging the rock. He's one of the best, just true arm talents in the ACC. Do they have enough weapons around him? They bring in some receivers. One of my Bobcats from Ohio University, Chase Hendricks, good receiver in the MAC for the last couple of years at Ohio. They bring in a Penn State receiver, and Ian Strong. They've got good continuity along the offensive line. The defense, it has some talent, but a lot of transfer portal talent and a lack of proven production at the Power 4 levels. I think that they're probably a year away if they can keep JKS in the program for next year and they get another strong portal class, another strong high school recruiting class. Next year's the year that it could probably be a dark horse, true contender in the ACC, but they're moving in the right direction. They're going to be a tough out like Wake Forest. These Atlantic Coast teams, these East Coast teams flying across the country that have to go play a game against JKS and Cal in this new energy Cal program, not going to be easy wins. So look out for Cal. They'll probably win a game or two that you don't think they're going to, but probably not true ACC contenders this year.
Okay, Max, I'll go to the last 2 teams from the Triangle. You got North Carolina and North Carolina State and there in Raleigh. What do you have for those 2 besides Jordan running the show?
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at UNC to start, right? That's where the media attention is. Bill Belichick, what's he going to do in year 2? Year 1 was obviously a complete disaster. The amount of people they had transfer in, transfer out. There were rumors around here that basically Bill Belichick was treating players, star players, different way than some of the lower players, and giving out a cell phone number to some, but not all of them. And there were certain parameters and rules around how you could contact him. I mean, the guy's he's a narcissist asshole. And yeah, sure, he's a good football coach, but I don't think he's meant for college football. He's got a lot to figure out this season. I mean, for God's sakes, they've got 5 quarterbacks in an open competition right now. I don't even think I've ever heard of that in college football. If you look at Billy Edwards, a Wisconsin transfer, Miles O'Neill is a transfer from Texas A&M, Travis Burgess, who's a blue chip true freshman recruit out of a high school in Georgia, Taron Dickens, a transfer from Western Carolina, and Autori Newkirk, who is the only remaining quarterback on the roster from last season. So I think it's a complete shit show in Chapel Hill. I want to know, Jordan, whatever the hell she calls herself. She's running this show. She's pulling some strings. I mean, we're wearing white stripper boots on the sidelines, telling people what they can and can't do. I am intrigued to see UNC this year. I hope they get the brakes beat off of them. I am not a Bill Belichick fan in this scenario. I think it's kind of a disgrace to college football and the culture overall in general. I just don't see it. I don't like it. NC State, on the other hand, the Wolfpack here in Raleigh, where I'm located, everybody is always keen to get their heart ripped out with the Wolfpack. Every single year, it feels like, oh my gosh, they've flashed some talent. It looks like we could actually have something this year, and they get their heart ripped out and shit on. CJ Bailey at the quarterback position under Dave Doran, who's been there what feels like a lifetime at this point, a head coach. CJ Bailey is a stud. He is a very good quarterback, I think, based on the limited experience that he's had. I think last year was his first start. That kid could really take the next step. He looked good to me when they came to Miami last year. I watched him in a couple games for NC State in general. Some NFL draft analysts out there as well that are looking at him and saying, hey, this kid's got a hell of a lot of talent. You know, he's got the legs, he's got the arm talent. Can he put it all together? But there are certainly some eyes. There'll be some scouts in the stands this season keeping an eye on CJ Bailey. I don't expect either one of these teams to really do much. I think NC State will probably have a better season just based on some continuity, both middle of the pack, even kind of that lower middle, if you will. I don't foresee anything crazy coming from them outside of maybe one CJ Bailey game of flashing and creating some noise around an upset. But ultimately, I just don't think they get it done.
I think North Carolina, with the upside of Bobby Petrino taking control of the offense, he's one of the best offensive minds in college football and has been really for like the last 2 decades. I think that immediately lifts the floor of North Carolina's offensive efficiency. And then you got Steve and Bill Belichick running the defense. I don't think they've got a ton of great talent, but I think they've got a pretty solid coaching staff in place now to at least get schemes in place. Can talent execute the schemes? I think we all probably doubt it, but at least they should have a little bit better idea what they're doing offensively now to go along with a defensive scheme that makes sense.
Yeah, UNC is just a culture problem. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people aren't really hearing that I'm kind of hearing as boots on the ground in the area, and it's a lot of turmoil. And I think Bill Belichick's just enough of an asshole that he doesn't really care about what people think. He's not going to be one to fix those things. There's zero empathy when it comes to some of that stuff too, which you're dealing with college kids at the end of the day. I just think it's a weird fit in general for him in college, and the amount of turnover that they've had. Sure, they got an amazing coaching staff on paper, but when you have that kind of turnover on the roster, do you really have enough to build that scheme in and really get it adopted the right way and to a point where these kids aren't making a bunch of mistakes, which we know is kind of the Belichick way, right, of being mistake free and fundamentals. But I think the culture is a big turmoil point at UNC, and I think it's a little bit more of a black eye than people understand.
All right, well, that takes us, we're getting down to the last few teams. Casey, what do you think Fran Brown and the Syracuse Orange will have for the ACC this year?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just run through these bottom 3. I think these are pretty clearly the 3 teams that are most likely to be at the bottom of the ACC standings this year. Look, I like Fran Brown. I think he came in, he did a really good job in year 1, kind of brought some new energy and enthusiasm to a very difficult place to recruit and build a roster. But last year they started off 3-1. They lost their quarterback Steve Angeli, and they lost their last 8 games of the year to finish the season 3-9 after a pretty surprising 10-3 season in year 1 for Fran. So it all depends on Angeli staying healthy this year. If he stays healthy and they get some of these young freshmen that they're really kind of hoping and relying on maturing sooner rather than later, they could maybe get back in that 500-ish range. If Angeli gets hurt, if these freshmen don't pop the way that they think they're going to, 3-9, 4-8, 2-10, very much on the table again for the Orange, unfortunately. Boston College. Look, Bill O'Brien, I think a very respectable coach. I love the job that he did at Penn State. Did a pretty good job in the NFL with the Texans for a while. And then was supposed to come back to the college ranks, be Ohio State's offensive coordinator, but wanted to get back to Boston. He was a Patriots OC for a while, loved the area. And Boston College is a brutally hard job in this era of college football. Boston's not a big college sports town. They like their college hockey, but outside of that, I mean, you've seen Boston College used to be very strong in football and basketball. Both programs are barely ever even remotely relevant anymore. They got crushed in the transfer portal. They lost a stud receiver to Arizona State. We talked about him last week. They lost a bunch of good defensive pieces. They lost their running back, Turbo Richard, to Indiana. Their quarterback, Dylan Lonergan, went to Rutgers. The leader of their defense, Davian Crouch, he left. So, I mean, it's just, they got raided. They brought in they're bringing in some decent pieces themselves. They bring in Liberty's running back, who had 1,300 yards and 16 touchdowns last year. Their starting quarterback's a guy named Mason McKenzie, who was a Division II player for Saginaw Valley State last year. That's who they're planning to match up with Clemson and Florida State and Miami. I think Boston College is really going to struggle. They won their first game and their last game last year, beat Fordham and then won at Syracuse without Syracuse's quarterback, but had 10 losses sandwiched in between there. So, 2-10, could they win another game or two and get, 3-9, 4-8, improve a little bit? Sure, maybe, but their schedule's really hard this year. I just don't see the talent. I think Bill O'Brien's going to have to really work some magic to have any kind of material improvement. Stanford, I think the trajectory of Stanford is up, but just not this season. Andrew Luck comes in as the GM. They bring in Pritchard to be their coach, who is a former Stanford player and a very well-respected name. I was listening to Stanford Steve on the Big Bets on Campus podcast earlier this week. He had very good things to say about Tavita Pritchard. He was Washington Commanders quarterback coach, helped develop Jaden Daniels into the 2024 AP Offensive Rookie of the Year. The guy's a legit coach, but the roster is pretty bare. You look at Stanford, I'm looking at Phil Steele's magazine. Stanford's last 5 seasons have been 3-9, 3-9, 3-9, 3-9, and 4-8. I think you're looking at another season along those lines before they make a pop, probably get to like more of a 500 type team in 2027. And then, if Tavita and Andrew Luck can convince guys to come to Stanford and prioritize that Stanford education, I think they could get back on the right track to where they were under Harbaugh and the early part of the David Shaw era, but just not going to happen for them this year. So I don't know, take your pick. Russian roulette between Syracuse, Boston College, and Stanford are who the bottom 3 in the ACC are.
All right. I think that wraps it up with all the teams.
Yep. So we'll do a little bit more ACC coverage in our official college football futures pick show, where we all kind of pick our favorite bets for, conference champions, playoff teams, all that good stuff. But this is the deepest dive we're going to get into for each ACC team. The Miami Hurricanes, the defending silver medalists, are the favorites here in the ACC this year, but they're not going to be devoid of challengers who are worthy of consideration. Ryan, Max, any closing thoughts on the ACC? Otherwise, we will see you guys next week, or maybe later this week on the Big Ten or the SEC preview show.
That's all I got to say right there, boys. Just lock it in. Lock it in. Darian Mensah for Heisman. Miami gets it done, and we're a perennial powerhouse, not this silver medal bullshit.
That's the show, now you know. This is how the real ones roll. Big thanks, good night, see you down the road on the Nard Dawg Sports Show.